Hello and welcome to the BucketLister Podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the BucketLister Podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and this is Season 2, Episode 2. And today we're in for a really exciting episode because I'm talking to a very old friend of mine, not old in terms of his age, old in terms of known him for a very long time now. And it's with my pleasure to introduce Mike Downing. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Keith. How are you this afternoon?
Oh, well, it's afternoon here, but morning where you are because you're currently
I'll have my cup of tea.
Yeah, Mike is currently lives in Boulder, Colorado. Like I say, I've known Mike for a long, long time now. And Mike has led some of our trips at the Bucket List Company as well, and has been to Nepal for us. And I just thought Mike's got a massive amount of knowledge of the outdoor industry. He's done some really cool stuff in his time. He now spends his time between Boulder, Colorado, in Spain, where he lives between the two, and he's worked for some of the biggest outdoor brands as well in his time. So I thought it would be a really interesting conversation to get Mike onto the podcast today. But before we start, Mike, do you want to just talk about? I mean, you started life predominantly as a dirtbag climber, didn't you, all those years ago? And you were on that kind of amazing scene in America when climbing was just becoming popular. And like, we've sat down and had conversations over a bottle of red or a beer where you've told me some of these stories of the people you climbed with, and it's people that are listening now would know as well. And you were part of that original kind of Yosemite scene, weren't you, back when climbing first sort of really got popular in America?
Yeah, that's right. And I think you nailed it with the dirtbag climber, because living in our vans, living in our cars, eating beans and rice to survive and get to the next climbing area. And being based in Boulder, Colorado, it was easy to travel to Wyoming, to the Grand Tetons, to Yosemite. And there was always a really great how would I put it? We were competitive, but we were also friends with the Californian climbers. So the Colorado guys would come into the valley and they'd do one of their first ascents, and then the valley guys would come to Colorado, and there was this back and forth. It was good. It was good energy, and the likes of the stone masters of Yosemite that would come to Colorado and steal some of our precious first ascents. It was good. And that was the likes of Lynn Hill, John Long, John Backer, Jack Roberts, all good friends of mine for many years. And some real characters and some great times.
So, you were part of that big wall era of climbing when big walling became popular, weren't you? That's
right. I climbed the nose on El Cap, the first route on El Cap in 1984. And back in those days, it was a multi-day event. And I think we spent 4 bivvy nights on the wall, 5 days to climb it. Nowadays, the guys are climbing it in less than 2 hours. And so, which is just, it's phenomenal that they can do that kind of speed record and speed ascents. But yeah, climbing it in those days, it was a different story, hauling your sleeping bags, hauling your food, really vertical backpacking. And it was some great experiences. And really traveling from Colorado to Yosemite, we didn't have walls that size. We have the diamond on Long's Peak, which, I'm going to say it's 400 meters versus a 1,000 meter wall like El Cap. So it was really nice to explore some of these big walls of the valley.
And I suppose, when you were, and I think we go back to that whole thing of dirtbag climbing in that, because climbing as a profession is completely changed now, isn't it? The money that is in climbing now, considering when you were climbing, it's just a completely different starting point, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, sponsored climbers were just starting to come around in the late 80s, and I had the fortune of working with La Sportiva. I was hired as one of the very first sales representatives. In fact, the first North American sales rep for La Sportiva, and we had a handful of sponsored climbers, but they were given shoes, they were given t-shirts, and they were happy, to get that. They weren't getting paychecks like the guys today, and endorsements from Red Bull and every other, Toyota or whoever you're talking about, like big money. And some of these guys, in those early days were climbing really hard and pushing the limit the same way the guys and girls are these days, pushing the limit. But we also didn't have the competition circuits. I mean, we've got climbing in the Olympics now. Who would have ever thought, Olympic sport, coming from dirtbags in Camp 4, running from the Rangers and hiding out to being, Olympic champions. So it's really neat to see it come full circle.
But you made it onto the World Cup climbing scene, didn't you? You were competing as well. You sort of took that step into.
I started as, in the early days, trad climbing was the only thing we had. We didn't clip bolts, we didn't have competition climbing. But when it did start, I really embraced both the sport climbing and the competition climbing. Did quite a bit of competition climbing here in North America. I think I was ranked 7th in the nation when I competed in 93 in both the Zurich World Cup and also in Toulon, the World Cup. Happy to make the U.S. team and compete in those early days. It was definitely an eye-opening experience.
And I mean, one thing that I want to talk to you about today is, I want to have a chat with you about kit, really. So, people can, we can have a chat about equipment for treks and that sort of thing. Because when did you realize that actually I need a job and I can't be a dirtbag climber anymore, and I'm going to have to make a living here at some point? And obviously you did that very well. And like you say, you've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, but did you decide to go into that sort of thing so you could continue doing the thing you actually really love doing?
Indeed. I went into it because it's actually something that's been in my family for many years, and that's being in sales. My grandfather was a sales rep. One of my brothers, sales rep for many years. And I can remember my grandfather telling me, Mike, if you make the people you work with your friends, you'll never feel like you work again. And I knew that if I could be a sales rep in the outdoor industry and sell climbing equipment and outdoor kit to people that I knew, that I liked, that were, like-minded, that I could do something that I enjoyed and still pursue the climbing. So yeah, in I guess it was 89, I was hired as the first La Sportiva sales rep. Nobody knew La Sportiva. The guy who imported it thought he'd climbed in Italy and seen the shoes, and we brought them to the U.S. It was a struggle for sure. And in those early days, I always had other lines that I sold as an independent rep. We were allowed to sell other harness lines, other chalk bag lines. And so I ended up picking up this unknown little brand out of Vancouver called Arc'teryx. And that was in the early days when there were two guys sewing harnesses in a garage in in the North Shore of Vancouver. And it was really just that, a garage operation. And anyways, I went up to Vancouver to meet these guys and go climbing, really. I'd never been to Canada. So checked out their little factory, grabbed a couple of harnesses, drove up to Squamish, which is their local rock climbing area, and started testing some harnesses. And anyways, we partied like rock stars. We all made friends that night. We had a handshake deal in the parking lot the next morning that lasted me 25 years. I worked with that company for 25 years. And, this brand is in my mind, one of the most exclusive brands in the industry. There's a lot of good brands up and coming right now, but these guys really shook the industry by introducing the latest harnesses, then going into backpacks, and then developing, industry standard outerwear. And so, they've just topped, I think, 1 billion in annual sales. So come a long ways from our when I started, like I said, 2 chalk bags and 1 harness. That was the entire collection and a couple of guys sewing. But they always had this idea that we were going to take this thing and make that logo, that little iconic dinosaur logo, a household name, and the owner always wanted it to be as recognizable as the Nike swoosh, without seeing the word Arc'teryx, just that little bird, as we call him.
And I think, like you say, they've definitely done that now, and they've really sort of put themselves as a brand at the forefront, and as the high end brand in the outdoor industry. I think we certainly see that in the UK. That if you go into an outdoor shop, you've got the range of waterproof jackets or down jackets, but the most expensive one in the shop is generally an Arc'teryx one. I mean, Is that still the case in the US as well?
It is. In the US, they've changed a bit because they're selling more direct, B2B or B2C. So they're really going direct with their own retail stores and then online sales. They've backed away from some of the specialty stores. So making it a little more exclusive to get. They've just opened a beautiful new store here in Boulder. They've never had an independent store in Boulder. You guys have one right in the Piccadilly Shopping Center in London. So it's a premium brand. They do everything with exception. They just, everything that they do is, whether it's materials, construction, design, it's all of these elements put together as one that really makes a fantastic product. And like I said, other people are catching up. I've had the fortune of working with Montaigne, a great English brand, here in the last 18 months. I was headhunted and brought on as a U.S. country manager for Montaigne, and they hadn't really ever really achieved sales of any significant numbers here in the U.S. and they brought me on, and I was blown away, Keith, with how good the kid is at Montaigne, how they've really done a great job of researching materials, the best factories in Asia to do the products, and keeping the prices competitive. I put together we've talked about putting together a kit list for the EBC, for Everest Base Camp. And, weight is a real concern for a lot of people on that trek because, as we all know, you're only allowed, 15
kilos between your duffel and your day pack. Yeah.
On the flight from Kathmandu to Lukla. Yeah. So, when you start with a heavy pair of trousers, a heavy duffel bag, a heavy sleeping bag, and then your waterproof jacket's heavy, before you know it, you're at your 15K limit. So weight is a real key. And I think Montaigne is really, because of their running background and their fast and light mentality, they've really taken some ultralight fabrics, some proprietary fabrics as well that are fantastic, non-Gore-Tex, then to make these jackets. If you can imagine, Keith, a waterproof that weighs 4 ounces, so like just tiny little things that are made for these long distance ultra trail runs. Weight is a real concern. Fabrics are a concern, but the guys I've seen at Montaigne really have done their homework, and they've come up with some amazing product that goes, in my mind, head to head with Arc'teryx in regards
I think it was really interesting because we were having a chat before we started recording the podcast, and we were discussing like Arc'teryx and like the development of what they've done, and we both said like everybody's catching them up now, isn't it? Like it's very difficult now. Like what else can you do with a waterproof jacket to do anything with it? Like you're almost at the limit now of changes you can make to it or introduce to it to make it. And everybody else is now just copying that, aren't they?
Exactly. In 1999, 2000, when Arc'teryx introduced the first outerwear, that waterproof zipper, it was a YKK zip that they flipped and sewed in backwards, which allowed them to not put any flaps and hunks of Velcro to cover the main front zip or the pit zips. And that zipper was revolutionary. I mean, no one had it. everybody, when we first showed that jacket, we were just like, wow, it looks so space age and so modern. Then they took all of the seams, reduced them when they had seam tapes that were, something like 1/4-inch seam tape. They brought that down to 16th inch in seam tapes, which reduces a lot of bulk and a lot of weight. So like all of these little things, it wasn't one little thing. It was all of these little minute things that made a significantly better waterproof jacket. But what they didn't do was they didn't patent that Eurotech zipper. And so that zipper was then allowed to be sold to every other manufacturer on the planet, which was really one of the most unique things on the jacket. And then over time, all of, whether it would be Rab, Montaigne, North Face, they've all been able to copy and really mimic those micro seam tapes to get the weights down. And then, of course, they're all like scientists working on fabrics. They're coming up with their own face fabrics, which are lighter, more durable, and nicer to wear because they're not crinkly and noisy. So it's an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you say, the brands you've worked with over the years, like La Sportiva, like I've been wearing La Sportiva boots. And a lot of the guides wear La Sportiva boots that work for us. Like we love La Sportiva. Obviously, I've got an indoor climbing center as well. So climbing shoes wise, like between that and, 510's the other one, but you've also worked for that brand as well at some point.
That's
right.
Right.
You've done Sunto, you've done Arc'teryx, you've done Montaigne. You've worked for some of the really big brands out there. But in terms of if you were going to, think about one of our treks, like what would when you did Everest Base Camp? I mean, let's be honest, when you turn up to lead one of our treks, like you've probably got the best kit out of everybody just because of the contacts that you've had over the years and all of those samples that you must have. I mean, I reckon if you open your wardrobe, you'd never need to buy another waterproof jacket again, I expect. But
you're right about that.
Unfortunately, you're very small, Mike, so I can't nab any of it off you because I'm a lot taller than you are. But in terms of what you packed in your bag for Everest Base Camp, like what did you have in there, like in terms of kit for that trek?
Well, starting off with the duffel bag, like I mentioned early, a lightweight, very durable duffel bag that's going to live on the back of a porter or on the back of a yak for better part of 18 days. So a durable, but yet lightweight. I've seen some of these giant duffel bags that weigh, 2-3 kilos on their own. And so all of a sudden you're taking, a big portion of your allotment off just on the duffel. But I think the jacket pant combo that I used on the EBC trek, it was the Cerium jacket. And that's a down jacket by Arc'teryx. The Cerium jacket, they do a Cerium hoodie as well. It was one of my favorite pieces to have. It was just so light, so comfortable in the hut at night, on the trail when it got a little bit breezy, and it was still compactable enough to really not take up much room in my own, 30-liter rucksack. The pants that I wore were the Gamma LT pant, which is a soft shell stretch woven pant, and it was fantastic. They, if you're going to compare pricing, like just pricing alone, Keith, to compare with a Montaigne, that Gamma LT pant, I think it was around 130 pounds. Montaigne makes a fantastic pant that I compare to that called the Terra pant. And there's the Terra Light pant as well. You're going to spend about 90 pounds for these trousers, and you're going to find that they're going to be about the same weight. But Arc'teryx is always going to try to beat everyone on weight, and they do beat out, let's say, on this Terra pant by 60 grams. Okay, 60 grams, is that worth another 40 pounds that you can put into buying some nice Bridgedale socks that you need as well? Maybe not. I think in the Gore-Tex shell zone, I took the Beta LT jacket. That's an Arc'teryx jacket. Nowadays, I'm running the Montaigne version, and Montaigne, the Spear, or actually, it was the Phase Light jacket by Montaigne. It's a brand new piece out this year. Has the waterproof zippers, very soft, compactable fabric, 30 denier face fabric, so really light, but still very durable. And that thing comes in, what was that jacket was coming in 300 pounds, 300 grams. An equivalent Arc'teryx jacket, 450 pounds and 395. They do have pit zips on there, so it actually is a little heavier. So when your customers are doing the shopping, I say do that back and forth, value to weight. And I think you'll find that when you start comparing a lot of the Montane product or Rab, easy to get both of those brands in the UK for most of your customers. And fantastic kit on both realms. So the pant, the Gamma LT pant, the Beta LT jacket, the Cerium down jacket. I also took a piece that I wear quite often. It's called the Kyanite. And the Kyanite by Arc'teryx is about $120. Equivalent jacket from Montane, the Proteum. You're going to see the Proteum Light jacket about $75. You're going to pay about $150 for the Arc'teryx version. So nearly double for a very, very similar product. But again, look at the weight. Weight is key, especially for Everspace Camp. I think on Kili, you've done Kili how many times now, Keith?
14 now.
14. Well, one of these days you'll send me.
Well, we can have that conversation. We're seeing each other in Spain in a couple of weeks. We can sit down with a glass of wine and you can convince me which ones you want to do next.
Perfect. But yeah, I don't think the weight restrictions are quite the same on Kili as they would be when we're looking at.
Well, I mean, they are. I mean, on Kili, you're allowed around 12 kilos in your duffel bag, but obviously you're only on a 6 or 7 day trek, not a 13, 15 day trek. So actually, in terms of the extras that you need in the bag, you're kind of cutting them down by half if you're having, a pair of socks for every other day or whatever you're doing. So yeah, you can get it in easier for Kilimanjaro. But then again, for Kilimanjaro is a bit different because you go through 4 different climate zones on Kilimanjaro. So you're in a humid, hot rainforest up to a glacier zone at the top, and you've kind of got to pack for all eventualities as well. So, light kit comes into it again. But I mean, Jake and I did a Facebook Live today actually on and we talked about jackets. And the thing that we were sort of saying about was actually creating a layering system to put these jackets together to give you that maximum warmth, that the maximum amount of options you can possibly have across a range of a soft shell, an insulated jacket, and then a waterproof jacket. If you've got a good version of each of them and you can wear them all, it just gives you so many more opportunities to dress for every eventuality, really. Yeah,
100%, Keith. And I didn't mention layering, but I assume your clients know that layering is the key and the absolute key in getting the right kit. And layering, whether it's in your trousers, with your base layer, your mid layer, your insulated layer, and your shell, but absolutely crucial to getting the best kit for the activity.
And I think, like you say, the Arc'teryx is, if you look at it in the UK, and it's probably very similar in the US as well, but from a price point of view, I would say, like in the UK, we would have Rab, Montane, mountain equipment would kind of all sit, is what I would say is like the mid-level tier.
Yeah.
And then you'd put Arc'teryx in the top tier, and there's, unless you're going into something like PhD or something like that, which is kind of made to measure kit, like that would sit above Arc'teryx. But in terms of, I suppose in terms of the general, mass produced stuff, I suppose Arc'teryx would be at the top of that. And then below that, you've still got options. And, like we say to people all the time, like, how serious are you about your trips? Because, if this is something that you're going to constantly keep doing, then you want to buy good kit that's going to last. But if you're only ever going to go in, you've signed up for an Everest Base Camp trek, and that's the only thing you're ever going to do, then actually either you don't want to spend that much money, or we would say go and hire it off a company. And, because it is a lot of money to spend on a trip. You've already spent a few £1,000 booking your trip, but you could quite easily spend that again on kit, couldn't you?
Oh, for sure. And the rental options in Kathmandu that you're well aware of are phenomenal. And even in Lukla, but yeah, you could rent probably everything you need to rent to climb Everest, right in Kathmandu, from your oxygen mask to 8,000 meter suit to the Olympus Mons boots, So yeah, you could,
or you could just do what Gareth does and go over there and get them to make it for you in some backstreet shop, and they'll stick a North Face logo on it, or you could probably get an Arc'teryx logo put on it as well. I mean, it's not going to be the same, but there's plenty of that around in Kathmandu, in there.
Yes, there is, absolutely lots of copying going on, and even complete fake.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago. I think I was with Dave, and we went in and we asked for something, and the guy was like, "No, I haven't got it, but I can make you one." And we were like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, come out the back." And we went out the back, and there was literally just like sewing machines and material and guys stuffing down into jackets. And he was like, "What do you want? What color do you want?" And I know Gareth went out there a couple of years ago, and what he wanted a short waist size sleeping bag, so he could, if he was going lightweight, he could put his down jacket on, and then he just wanted a sleeping bag that came up just above his waist, so he could have so he wasn't carrying extra weight. And literally the guy was like, he's like, "I don't need it for now." And he's like, "I'm going off on a trek now." And he was like, "Well, okay, when you get back from your trek, pop in and we'll have it made for you." And he walked back in, and there it was, all made ready for him. And I think it cost him about £40 or something like that, I think, equivalent. So it was, where are you going to get that? And, he's well happy with it. So, yeah, sure. You have definitely got the options in Kathmandu. Not so much if you're doing like a Kilimanjaro trek or something like that. You haven't got those options over there. But certainly in Nepal, you've got a lot more options for getting equipment. Where do you think equipment's going to go, Mike? Can it get lighter? Can it get...
I think so. I think there's some new fabrics that are being explored. The Dyneema, Dyneema is used a lot in harness manufacturing. And again, that's where Arc'teryx started, was harness manufacturing, and they're still pushing to redo their harness line, even though it's a fraction of their business. But this Dyneema fabric and fiber that can be put into outerwear, backpacks, for sure, more expensive, but like a nice pair of tires for a performance car. They wear out quick, but man, they drive like nothing else. So that's some of the trade-offs. Like, do we want to have something so light and fragile that it's kind of a one-time deal, or do you build something that's the workhorse that's going to last for 20 years? And I think for your clients, I think it is a lot of, what are you going to do after these treks? And it's really nice to have a great waterproof, obviously, when you're running around London, jumping on the metro, grabbing a cab, whatever. A great waterproof is an important thing to have in any climate. And if you buy one that's going to last a long time, you're going to be really happy with that piece that you... Well, I mean, memories from your Everest base camp and when you're running around London from pub to pub. Yeah,
I mean, I think, if you go back to your Dirtbag climber days, I love seeing some of the photos of you, with hair, but also like the luminous clothing that you're wearing. It was all very bright back then, wasn't it? But things seem to have stabilized now, that things don't seem to age so much now. And I bet you've got pieces of Arc'teryx kit, you worked with them for, like you said, for 25 years, that are still going strong now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have some of the original pieces from when we developed the snow sports collection for ski and snowboard, and they're still running strong. I'll have them, and they're timeless colors too. I think back, like you said, in the old days when it was a lime green with red and blue, you kind of feel like it's not going to be that's not going to be the jacket I'm going to wear in an urban environment. But the silvers, the grays, the deep blues that they have now that are they're just timeless in their color palette, and you don't feel funny wearing them in an urban situation. So.
Yeah. And what's the guarantee like with like Arc'teryx and Montaigne? Like, what are they offering? Because some brands
give what they call a full lifetime guarantee. Now, that's not to assume that the thing is going to last forever. So if you have a seam, a zipper, something that the manufacturer actually was responsible for installing and making, that's warranted for life, and they'll replace or they'll give you a new jacket. I know that Arc'teryx is very liberal with this, with their retail stores. I took a down jacket in, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, had a blown zipper on it. I thought they'll fix it. They'll give me my old sweaty down jacket back. And they said, no, we can't fix it the way we would like to. So we're going to give you a brand new jacket. The thing was 10 years old, and it had fully gone through its life cycle. Montaigne is very similar in that they manufacture a great product. They're going to warranty that on anything that they were, if your dog chews through the sleeve, they're going to fix it for you. But that's really not part of the problem of the jacket. If the seams blow out because the seam tape wasn't applied properly, that's a warranty, and they're going to take care of you on that. And I think that you'll find that with Mountain Equipment, certainly with Rab. I mean, Rab's a premier brand as well, and they're going to look out for their customers.
Yeah, and Patagonia is the same as well. Like, they've
Absolutely.
got an amazing guarantee on their stuff.
One of the most honorable competitors I ever sold against, Keith, was Patagonia. No question about it.
And I would say probably if we sort of didn't discuss Patagonia just a minute ago, but I would say they're probably the closest to Arc'teryx, aren't they?
For sure. And as far as their stance on the environment and what Yvon Chouinard, and he's like one of my ultimate idols, having been the ultimate dirtbag climber, living in his car, didn't even have a car, just living in the dirt, and then coming to be, the person that he is now with running this multi-million-dollar company. And then the founder also, Chouinard Equipment, which now has become Black Diamond. So this guy, has really, in my mind, come full circle from the ultimate dirtbag climber to, a very, very successful businessman, and then turning this entire thing over now. I don't know exactly the details of how he turned his company over, but in an very environmentally sound way.
Yeah, and I think when you look back at the history of a lot of American brands, Patagonia, North Face, Arc'teryx, they have come from people who have a passion of the outdoors that needed to fund their passion of the outdoors. And like you say, they set up in garages, they bought a printing press, they started making T-shirts, and to where they've come now is just such an amazing story, isn't it? I bet being part of that, I mean, you going up there and, buying some chalk bags to come back down and sell, like from Arc'teryx, like you were probably one of their first people that ever was selling their products.
Yeah, the second, in fact, and it's kind of an interesting story. The guy who introduced me to the Canadians at Arc'teryx, this guy called Jim Purdy, and Jim and I worked together at La Sportiva. Jim lived in Seattle, myself here in Boulder. He said, "Hey, I've got these." We were bouldering together in Waco Tanks, and he said, "I've got these Canadians that I'm working for. They're crazy. They got great ideas, but I think it's going to go somewhere. I really do. Like they're going to do something." And even in the days, Keith, when those guys, they couldn't afford to pay the reps. Like they'd put us off for months and months. They always did pay. They were honorable, but to keep the business going, they were like, the last guys we're going to pay are the reps, because we got to pay our sewers, we've got to pay our suppliers to keep this thing running. And it was a tough road for sure.
But I bet it was one hell of a journey, though, to, like you say, for being their second ever customer to what they are now, and being $1 billion company and being part of that journey with them. Because back then it was different, wasn't it? In terms of, like, you sold the product and you weren't a rep for them in the end, were you? Like, you actually had your business and you bought off them and you sold it into
No, that'd be a distributor model, and I wasn't a distributor. So no, I was officially an agent, sales rep. So I was for sure selling the product off of samples, and then they were shipping out of their own
Okay.
warehouse. A distributor model would have been golden for me to have something like that, but they were very smart to not give up many distributorships because they wanted to keep control of the company. And the guys that are distributors now are doing very well. I'll just put it that way because it's a premium brand. So I was an agent. In the end, we had a beautiful 2,000 square foot showroom here in Boulder. Three agents covering 4 different states, and we were doing turnover of well over 20 million annually. So it was big business and a lot of stress, but a lot of fun at the same time. We always had fun at our sales meetings, at our global sales meetings. It was good.
And I think like, times have changed, in it, because I remember when I was first come out in the industry, like brands would always give you stuff to have you wearing stuff because they wanted people in their clothing. Money was being thrown around all the time, and I know you've told me some stories where like you've paid for your clients to go like heli skiing and jump out of a helicopter as part of a new brand launch and stuff like that. But times are changing in terms of that now, isn't it? It's very hard to get hold of any kit anymore, and like the sponsorship deals are no longer just a couple of t-shirts and a new jacket. They've got a couple of people who they sponsor, not just giving it to everyone like they used to.
Exactly. And they look for the guys that are the most visible in social media. The guys, some of the best climbers are not the most, they're not the best at promoting themselves, but the people that are really good at promoting themselves and still doing outrageous things in the mountains that gets the people's attention. These are the kind of athletes that the La Sportivas, the North Faces, the Patagonias of the world, Arc'teryx, that they want to have on their team because, who doesn't know the name in climbing of Alex Honnold,
Yeah.
I climbed El Cap in 1984, and the thought of free soloing that thing without a rope, it's like going to the moon. Like, this is so far above what anyone else, the level this guy participates in the sport. And Alex is just one example. When you look at Alex, at what he does, you look at what the young guys and girls are doing in bouldering V15, V16, the big walls, the fast alpine ascents in the mountains. Like, I think some climbers at my age get salty and say, oh, it's so much easier now. But for me, I don't think it's any easier. I think that the athletes are really athletes. These are Olympic caliber athletes that are ready to go to the moon. They're not the dirtbag climbers eating beans and rice out of a tin. They're finely tuned athletes. And I don't think it's any easier. I think they're just a lot better.
Yeah. Mike, one question we ask any person that comes on to the podcast is, obviously you've lived a very adventurous lifestyle, but what is still on your bucket list?
Wow, that's a good one. I didn't anticipate that question. Well, it's always hard to reveal your secrets, I suppose, or your dreams, but I've always wanted to climb an 8,000 meter peak. I'd always thought it would be Everest because, of course, were you going to go for the smallest 8,000 meter peak or the biggest? So you think, well, of course, I'm going to go for Everest. And now, having been to Nepal and been to Everest Base Camp, it may not be Everest, but I definitely want to climb an 8,000 meter peak. And whether that's Choyu, whether that's Lhotse, I'm not really sure. But at some point, as my arthritic fingers don't allow me to rock climb at the level that I would like to, it's time to shift, and start doing some things that involve more lungs and legs versus upper body. So 8,000 meter peak. I would also love to climb an 8A again. So it's the eights, I guess.
The eights.
It's my lucky number. An 8,000 meter peak and climb 8A again. So that'd be 13B in American speak. I've climbed 8A plus, 8B, but that was many, many years ago. So I've got some good friends, English friends that my age as well, and we're all kind of striving for that goal of getting back to our 8A level of rock climbing, not bouldering, but of sport climbing. So those would be two of mine.
And have you got one lined up already for that then? Have you got a target in mind?
Not a particular route. I've got a crag that I really enjoy in Spain that's about 40 minutes from my house. It's called Ayshorta. Nobody would know it. People do know it now. It's in all the guidebooks. It was our secret climbing area for quite a number of years. It's shade all day. It's the most beautiful setting. You don't feel like you're anywhere near the Costa Blanca when you think of Benidorm. It's so remote and so mountainous. And like I said, shade all day. And there's loads of 8As on that wall. So I just need to pick one and sink into it.
And interestingly, like we did a podcast on the Costa Blanca the other day, because obviously, Mike, we met in the Costa Blanca many, many years ago. And we've been going out there climbing for quite a long time. And, we took a bucket list group out there last month. And, like you say, you do fly into Alicante Airport and you do drive past Benidorm to get up to where we're staying in. And actually what people don't realize, and I think the biggest shock from everybody that was on that trip, was actually how amazing the Costa Blanca countryside is. And once you literally drive 15 minutes from the coast up into the hills, like they just couldn't believe that there's, mountains bigger than Ben Nevis, and they're just like 10 minutes from the coastline. You can walk up it in 2 hours and have a lovely sort of afternoon out. It's just such an amazing place to be, isn't it?
It really is. And, I'm so fortunate to be based here in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. And at the same time, being in Finistrat, where our little house is, it's magical, to have the sea, to have the mountains, and have that contrast. And yeah, I like to go down to Benidorm for a pint or watch a football match, but it's maybe not every night. And so the infrastructure is great to have by, but man, you leave, like you said, 10, 15 minutes away from the coast, and it is a wild set of mountains. And some beautiful country.
Yeah, I mean, I need to come out and see you in Boulder at some point. It's too easy for us to meet up in Spain because you're there all the time. But I do need to jump on a plane at some time and head out and see you in Boulder. Well, Mike, thanks ever so much for coming on. I love chatting to you, hearing your stories from the past, because back in the 80s in the climbing, like it's sort of so famous in the climbing world, and the stories you tell are just so amazing. I love spending time chatting with you, and like I say, we're meeting up in Spain in a couple of weeks, so after a few bottles of red, we'll probably have a few more stories as well. So thanks ever so much for coming on and joining me today and sort of just talking through kit and your life, and it's been super fascinating. So again, thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Keith, and true honor to have worked for you and the Bucket List Company. Fantastic organization. Really was an eye-opening trip for me. I'd done some guiding before, and I'd never done a trekking guide. So I would say top-notch organization, and really, really appreciate your time and having me on today. Thank you.
Well, we hope to see you on another trip of ours very, very soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Hope you have enjoyed that. I certainly have. And what I'll do is I'll get Mike to send me a link to some of those items that he was talking about, the Arc'teryx and the Montaigne products. And I can put some links to the websites then, so you can sort of compare them for yourselves and see what Mike was on about with that. So hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the BucketLister Podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.